For 3 days in succession we turned out before dawn and, for no earthly reason, without breakfast," he relates. "I suppose that it is to show us that when the day comes the first thing will be to get us thoroughly uncomfortable and rotten. Then we proceed to Kriegspiel, according to the mysterious ideas of those in authority over us. On the last day we spent 3 hours under a hot if early sun, getting over 8 miles of country to a point we could have reached in a motor omnibus in 9 minutes and a half. I did it the last day in that, and then we made a massed attack upon entrenchments that could have shot us all about 3 times over, if only the umpires had let them. Then came a little bayonet exercise, but I doubt if I am sufficiently a barbarian to stick this long knife into anything living. Anyhow, in this battle I shouldn't have had a chance, assuming that by some miracle I hadn't been shot 3 times over. I was far too hot and blown when I got up to the entrenchments even to lift my beastly rifle. It was those others would have begun the sticking. For a time we were watched by 2 hostile aeroplanes. Then our own came up and asked them not to, and, the practice of aerial warfare still being unknown, they very politely desisted and went away and did dives and circles of the most charming description over the Fox Hills." All Barnet's accounts of his military training were written in the same half contemptuous, half protesting tone. He was of opinion that his chances of participating in any real warfare were very slight, and that, if after all he should participate, it was bound to be so entirely different from these peace maneuvers that his only course as a rational man would be to keep as observantly out of danger as he could, until he had learnt the tricks and possibilities of the new conditions. He states this quite frankly. Never was a man more free from sham heroics. Section 6. Barnet welcomed the appearance of the atomic engine with the zest of masculine youth in all fresh machinery, and it is evident that for some time he failed to connect the rush of wonderful new possibilities with the financial troubles of his family. "I knew my father was worried," he admits. That cast the smallest of shadows upon his delighted departure for Italy and Greece and Egypt with 3 congenial companions in one of the new atomic models. They flew over the Channel Isles and Touraine, he mentions, and circled about Mont Blanc. "These new helicopters, we found," he notes, "had abolished all the danger and strain of sudden drops to which the old-time airplanes were liable." And then he went on by way of Pisa, Paestum, Girgenti, and Athens, to visit the pyramids by moonlight, flying thither from Cairo, and follow the Nile up to Khartoum. Even by later standards it must have been a very gleeful holiday for a young man, and it made the tragedy of his next experiences all the darker. A week after his return his father, who was a widower, announced himself ruined, and committed suicide by means of an unscheduled opiate. At one blow Barnet found himself flung out of the possessing, spending, enjoying class to which he belonged, penniless and with no calling by which he could earn a living. He tried teaching and some journalism, but in a little while he found himself on the underside of a world in which he had always reckoned to live in the sunshine. For innumerable men such an experience has meant mental and spiritual destruction, but Barnet, in spite of his bodily gravitation towards comfort, showed himself, when put to the test, of the more valiant modern quality. He was saturated with the creative stoicism of the heroic times that were already dawning, and he took his difficulties and discomforts stoutly as his appointed material, and turned them to expression. Indeed, in his book he thanks fortune for them. "I might have lived and died," he says, "in that neat fool's paradise of secure lavishness above there, I might never have realized the gathering wrath and sorrow of the ousted and exasperated masses. In the days of my own prosperity things had seemed to me to be very well arranged. Now from his new point of view he was able to find they were not arranged at all, that government was a compromise of aggressions and powers and lassitudes, and a law a convention between interests, and that the poor and the weak, though they had many negligent masters, had few friends. "I had thought things were looked after," he wrote. "It was with a kind of amazement that I tramped the roads and starved, and found that no one in particular cared." He was turned out of his lodging in a backward part of London. "It was with difficulty I persuaded my landlady, she was a needy widow, poor soul, and I was already in her debt, to keep an old box for me in which I had locked a few letters, keepsakes, and the like. She lived in great fear of the public health and morality inspectors, because she was sometimes too poor to pay the customary tip to them, but at last she consented to put it in a dark tiled place under the stairs, and then I went forth into the world, to seek first the luck of a meal and then shelter." He wandered down into the thronging gayer parts of London, in which a year or so ago he had been numbered among the spenders. London, under the visible smoke law, by which any production of visible smoke, with or without excuse, was punishable by a fine, had already ceased to be the sombre smoke-darkened city of the Victorian time. It had been, and indeed was, constantly being rebuilt, and its main streets were already beginning to take on those characteristics that distinguished them throughout the latter half of the 20th century. The insanitary horse and the plebeian bicycle had been banished from the roadway, which was now of a resilient, glass-like surface, spotlessly clean, and the foot passenger was restricted to a narrow vestige of the ancient footpath on either side of the track, and forbidden at the risk of a fine, if he survived, to cross the roadway. People descended from their automobiles upon this pavement and went through the lower shops to the lifts and stairs, to the new ways for pedestrians, the rows, that ran along the front of the houses at the level of the first story, and, being joined by frequent bridges, gave the newer parts of London a curiously Venetian appearance. In some streets there were upper and even third-story rows. For most of the day and all night the shop windows were lit by electric light, and many establishments had made, as it were, canals of public footpaths through their premises in order to increase their window space. Barney made his way along the night scene rather apprehensively, since the police had power to challenge and demand the labor card of any indigent-looking person, and if the record failed to show he was in employment, dismiss him to the traffic pavement below. But there was still enough of his former gentility about Barney's appearance and bearing to protect him from this. The police, too, had other things to think of that night, and he was permitted to reach the galleries about Leicester Square, that great focus of London life and pleasure. He gives a vivid description of the scene that evening. In the centre was a garden raised on arches lit by festoons of light, and connected with the rows by 8 graceful bridges, beneath which hum the interlacing streams of motor traffic, pulsating as the current alternated between east and west and north and south. Above rose great frontages of intricate rather than beautiful reinforced porcelain, studded with lights, barred by bold illuminated advertisements, and glowing with reflections. There were the 2 historical music halls of this place, the Shakespeare Memorial Theatre, in which the municipal players revolved perpetually through the cycle of Shakespeare's plays, and 4 other great houses of refreshment and entertainment whose pinnacles streamed up into